Hi everyone, Leah here from EurekaCrystalBeads.com with another helpful beading video for you. Before I get started, just a quick reminder as always to go check out the rest of our channel, and if you like what you see, hit the subscribe button and notification bell and you'll always know when we're posting new content. This is going to be a stitch tutorial video, so just to forewarn you, it is not for a completed, finished project. It is instead how to do a stitch just in general. And today it's going to be even count circular peyote. So I have here a variety of 5 different sizes of beads. They are laid out left to right from largest to smallest. And we are going to be starting with the bead right in the center here. And the reason we have multiple sizes of beads is because I'm going to show you how to pull your circular peyote in and as well as flare it out. These are techniques that are very commonly used when you are bezeling around a Swarovski Rivoli, something that's actually one of my absolute favorite things to do. So this is something that you will be able to take and use that later for a project. If you are sort of new to doing peyote bezels, this is the base of that technique. So this is going to be a good video for you to bookmark. So again, that bead that I'm going to be starting with, the one right in the middle, this is a Japanese cylinder bead. We here at Eureka carry 2 different varieties. We carry the Mayuki Delica, which is what this one happens to be. And we also carry the Toho Eikos. I'm going to give you a little close-up of what they look like. They are beautifully uniform, and they are little cylinders. Okay. Let's get that in focus there. There we go. You can see they're nice little perfect cylinders. They have a beautifully square profile, which means that they interlock beautifully. And if you're familiar with peyote, that's what you need. It is an interlocking stitch. So that's what we're going to be starting with. For this particular example, I'm going to pick up 36 of these. We're going to go with 36. So I'm just going to get that to happen. Okay, so I've loaded on my 36 cylinder beads here. Again, these are Mayuki Delicas, and you want to make sure that you double check that amount, because if it's off by even 1 bead, you no longer have an even number anymore. And so what we're learning today won't really work. So double check, make sure you have that correct amount. And what we're going to do is we're going to tie them into a circle, and we're going to use a square knot for that. And if you're not familiar with a square knot, it's like a double knot, but that second knot is done backwards. So right over left, left over right. So I just did my right over left. I'm doing my left over right. So you get your two little knots there, like that. And we're going to pull them down together. So we get a little loop, just like this. Now, one thing that will make this easier, and this is especially important if the goal of learning this is to do peyote bezels around Rivolis, is you don't want this loop pulled so tight that everything's really stiff, but you don't want it to be loose either where you can see any of the fire line in between the beads. You don't want them to be able to wiggle. So what I like to do to make sure I have just the right tension is I just want to be able to move it around in my fingers and the beads move around just nicely. And that's how I know I have nice tension. You can see it's not too stiff there. And this is, by the way, 6-pound fire line that I'm using. It's my preferred size, but you can certainly go up or down a little if you'd like. It's really a little bit more dependent on what you're going to do later. If you have some specific embellishments in mind that you know this might be too thin or too thick for, but for what we're doing here, 6-pound is ideal. And I'm going to just travel through another few beads, just kind of whatever my needle happens to pop through. This is because I want to start my beading stitch coming out of a bead cleanly and not coming out of a knot in between 2 beads. So I'm just going to pull my knot in slightly into that loop. And now I am nice and cleanly coming right out of one of those cylinder beads, one of those delicas. Now, the deal with peyote stitch, if you've never done it before, is that it has a mantra you want to keep saying in your head. And that mantra is pick up a bead, skip a bead, go through. And that's what you're going to keep repeating. So we're going to pick up a bead. We're going to skip over the next bead. Let's get that in focus here. We're going to skip over the next bead and we're going to go through. So we're going to go through that one. So you can see that if we're coming out of bead A, we've skipped over bead B and we're going into bead C. And then what will happen is the bead that we picked up is going to nicely sit next to the bead we skipped over. So you can see where my thread's coming out now. Okay. And that's what you're going to do for this first step. I mean, well, really, it's what we're going to do for all of the steps, but as far as for this first size of bead, again, pick up a bead, skip a bead, go through. So let me turn that. There we go. So you can see where my thread is coming out. We're going to skip over the next bead and go into the bead after that. Just like that. So essentially, we're going in and out of every single bead in this loop, and we're just picking up a bead every single time that we do that. Now I'll bring this down and I'll show you how it's going to sit nicely. Boop. And so you can see, give it a nice little bit of a tug. And you can see what starts to happen. We start to have beads in our beadwork here that are popping up and that are sitting lower. And those are important because those are the beads that are popped up are the beads that we'll go into in subsequent rounds. So what I'm going to do is take a quick little break. I'm going to get to the other side again so I can show you what's called a step up, which will complete this row and start the next one. So I have to get caught up. I'll see you back here in a second. Okay, so I've made it all the way around. And I'm going to show you what the step up is. Now, if you're not familiar with a beading stitch that has a step up, it's essentially an extra little step or an extra little bead that you'll go through that ends the round or the row that you're working on and sets you up to start the next one. So if you were to continue on with regular peyote stitch like we've been doing, you'd be going into that bead right there, okay? Just like we've been doing, except now the step up is going to be going through one extra bead. So we're actually going to angle the needle and we're going to go into the bead that we were meant to go to, but then that one extra one, that first popped up bead on the inner row. And that's your step up. Your step up is going to be those two beads every time you have to do one, which will be at the end of each round. And if you're doing even count circular peyote, you will have one, like I said, every round. If you're doing odd count circular peyote, you will never have a step up, but that's a video for another day, folks. So now what we're going to do is move to the next size bead. We're going to do some peyote on the inside of this circle, and we're going to use two different sizes that are each a little smaller, and they're what's going to pull the peyote in. So this would, for example, create the seat that a rivoli would sit on, or if it's just something decorative that you're making, this will help that to pull in. So the first one I'm going to be using is a Miyuki 15. We do carry both Miyuki 15s and Toho 15s. Depending on the project may determine which one you want to go with. I am more of a fan of a Miyuki 15 for this particular type of project or this particular type of beading. And then there are other times where I prefer the Toho, but for this particular one, I do like the Miyuki. I find that a Miyuki 15 is a hair smaller than a Toho 15, so it's a bit more ideal for doing the circular peyote here. So because I've gone and done my step up, I'm going to show you a good close-up. I am perfectly set up to nest in the next little bead. And what's great about once you get past that first new row of peyote is that you're only going through the beads that are popped up. So it's much easier to know where to put your needle. So I'm going to pick up one of those 15s. I'm going to go into the next bead that's popped up. And it just pulls right down, just like that. I'll show you that one more time. You can see right where I gotta go. It pulls it right into that little spot. So I'm going to keep going all the way around, and I will stop just shy of the next step up just so I can show you that again. And we will take a look at what it looks like as we start to pull in our peyote. All right, so I have one more 15 to get in there. You can see I'm ready to do my step up. So the bead that I naturally need to go through is this delica. Get it through there so you can see it. This delica right here. But then we're also going to angle, and we're going to go into the first bead of the round that we're just finishing. That is, again, our step up. So we're going to pull down that last 15, pulls it right into place there. And what we get, because we pulled in with a smaller bead, is we still have sort of a flat disc type shape because it's just pulling it straight in. What would happen with the peyote, if you continue to use just the delica and that you did delica round after round, is you'll start to build up a wall and you'll literally create a cylinder or a tube based off of that first base ring that we did. But because we're using smaller beads and then later bigger beads, we can pull it in or flare it out. So we're still going to keep up with this sort of flat disc shape. Now, the next bead I'm going to use is a bead that I think a lot of beaders don't really utilize as much as they can, or as much as I think they don't realize that they should. And that bead, this is the only bead on my mat here that is not a Japanese bead. This is a Czech charlotte, a size 15 Czech charlotte. Now, a size 15 Czech charlotte is smaller than a Japanese 15, considerably so actually, probably about a good 50%. This is what I love to do when I want to pull in something even more beyond just what a Japanese 15 would do for me, because it just pulls it in that last little bit. It adds a beautiful metallic accent. They do make them in non-metallic colors, but we carry a beautiful selection of the metallic colors. And to me, I think this is one of my absolute staples in my bead box because of the beautiful little fine metallic accent that you can get. So I'm going to show you what these look like. You plug them in there. So I picked up my little guy there. You can see that little guy right there on my needle. And the reason it's called a charlotte is because it actually has a single facet on it. So it does differentiate it a little bit from other beads of its size. But it has a beautiful sparkle. You can see how it just pulls it right in very nicely. And you can see the size difference between the Czech 15 charlotte and then the Japanese 15 next to it. You can certainly see that there is a size difference, and that's what will pull this in even more. So I'm going to go around with my Czech size 15 charlottes, and I'll be back in a minute. All right, so you can see what's happened now that I've pulled in with those Czech charlottes. And I don't know if you can see, based on when I move it around, you can see that a little bit of a glint on some of those beads, especially there. This one right there is glinting nicely. Right there, that one's glinting nicely. But they have a beautiful, lovely, subtle sparkle to them. But you can see how they just pull it in nicely, and they create such a metallic accent that I really implore you, if you've never added the metallic Czech 15 charlottes into your beadwork, definitely give them a shot. I can't live without them. So what we're going to do now is work our way to our outer edge. So we've pulled in really as much as we can pull in. The only other way that we could have pulled in even more using peyote stitch is if we'd done, say, a second row with the Japanese 15 and then a second row with the Miyuki 15. But I just don't think we needed to see something quite as redundant for this particular video. But you certainly could do that, and you'd get a little bit more of a pull inside. Again, if we were sitting a riveling onto this, that was appropriate for a 36 count bead ring, which would be a 14 millimeter Rivoli. We've just created the nice little seat that will sit underneath it. So now what we're going to do is just work our way to the outer edge. What we want to do is be coming out of one of the outer beads that is most popped up. So just any of the popped up beads around the outer edge. So when you travel through peyote, you're going to travel diagonally. So if you can take a look and see that I'm coming out of one of the Czech charlottes, I'm then just moving diagonally into that Japanese charlotte. That Japanese 15. And then I'll just go just right up here. You just travel diagonally. It's just our goal to get to that outer edge. Whether you want to zigzag or go in a diagonal line, as long as you get there, that's all that really matters. Now we're going to move to a size 11 seed bead. This particular one does happen to be a Toho. We carry Toho and Miyuki. So a little bit more rounded than a cylinder bead is. The hole is not quite as large as a cylinder bead, but that's all right. For what we're doing, that's just fine. But because this has flared out, the space there in between those popped up beads is slightly larger than what is perfect for a delica. If I were to continue the peyote with delicas, what would happen is this would actually pull upwards, and we'd start to form that wall of that cylinder. But we want to keep flaring it out. We want to keep this flat. So that's why we're going to use a larger bead to encourage that. So all I'm doing is going into the next popped up bead in my ring. And this is just going to pull right down, just like that. Pull that out so you can see it again. Just like that, pulls right in. So to show you that again. Just like that, pulls right down. There you go. So I'm going to keep going around and I'll show you what that looks like when we get back in a second. All right, now as you can see, we've been going around, flaring that out, and I'm just about to add in my last bead, but there is that step up that we're going to have to do. So you can see that this is the delica that I need to go into, and then I'm going to go right into the size 11 right after it. That is our step up. Your step up, again, will always be the bead that you're meant to go into to nest in the last bead of that row or that round, but then you go right into the very first bead that you added in the round that you're finishing up. So it's always those two beads there. And this is going to nest in that last little bead. And then we're just going to do one more round to show you what it's like to add in some size 8s. So these are some size 8s that I'm putting in. And they're going to nest right into the larger space that we've created. Again, if I kept going with the size 11s, I would start to form that wall again. But because we keep getting larger, we just keep flaring out. So I have one of them on my needle here. I'm going to go through my next popped up bead. Oops. As I get caught around everything. You can see that, it just pulls right in. Oop, right in there. So I'll show you one more of those. Pulls it right in. All right, so I'll be back in a second to show you that round completed. All right, so now I'm about to add in that last size 8. This is a Toho size 8. And of course, we're going through the size 11 that we would normally to get it in there. And then we're also going through the next bead, which is the very first size 8 that we added all the way back at the beginning, because that's our step up. We're gonna nest that little guy right in there. Just like that. And this is what we got. Now, in and of itself, this actually would be a beautiful little element for you to make a whole bunch of. And it'd be a lovely little project to whip up. Maybe rings that are interlocking, or this could just be a beautiful earring dangled. But again, traditionally, what many people use this for is for bezeling around rivolis, where depending on the bead that you pick up and the number of walls of delica bead, a number of rows of delica beads, you create that cylindrical wall, and then you pull it back in on top with the smaller beads. And we do have plenty of other videos on our channel that show that technique. A lot of our more recent ones actually have been hugely popular, showing how to bezel around a rivoli. So if you thought this was intriguing, or if you looked at one of those videos and it seemed a little daunting, maybe you come back to this video to get sort of the basics under your belt. But this is basically what you get. So we started with those delicas, we pulled it in a couple sizes and flared it out a couple sizes. And this basically gives you the gist of circular peyote even count. So we're going to link you to the different beads that I used below if you wanted to recreate something like this. You can visit us on over at eurekacrystalbeads.com for all of these materials. And comment below if there's anything else specific that you'd like to see me demonstrate. If you have any questions or comments on the video, we'd love to hear them. All right, see you later. Bye-bye.